Story 1 title, Delivering in the Dark, a pizza driver's haunting night. It was December in Canada, and I was working the late shift at Dominic's, a local pizza place. My sector for deliveries that night was the outskirts of town, along the foothills and further north. With 6 inches of fresh snow and a storm raging, the roads were treacherous. But I had an advantage. An odd car, studded tires, and even chains as a backup, plus some experience under my belt as one of the senior drivers. As one of the few with a suitable vehicle, I was called upon to make an extra long delivery, right on the edge of our usual range, roughly 45 kilometers from the store. The weather was horrendous, so I decided to call the number on the order slip to confirm the address and the customer's willingness to brave the storm for pizza. A cheerful-sounding elderly lady answered, assuring me she still wanted the pizza despite the dire conditions. Her gratitude sounded promising for a substantial tip. She explained that she had a backup generator keeping her house lit, making it easy to find. She urged me to take my time due to the terrible weather. With visions of a generous tip dancing in my head, I set out on the highway after grabbing a coffee, and almost immediately after leaving the city limits, I noticed something unsettling. All the lights, even the street lights, had gone out. Suspecting a power outage due to the storm, I called my boss on his cell phone to confirm, and indeed it was a sector. Wide power failure. I then tried to call the lady I was delivering to. Attempting to win her over with extra politeness, I inquired, "Hello, this is your delivery driver. I've noticed there's a power outage and was wondering if you still wanted the pizza despite these terrible conditions." To my surprise, the elderly lady responded warmly, commending the excellent service and insisting on her desire for the pizza. She assured me that her backup generator would light her house, making it hard to miss. It seemed like a win for both of us. But as I drove deeper into the darkness, with only my subpar headlights cutting through the heavy snowfall, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. It was well past midnight, and I had entered a world of darkness and isolation. The snowfall made visibility nearly non-existent, and I felt utterly alone on that desolate road. About 10 kilometers down, what I could only assume was a dirt road buried beneath the snow, I encountered a car in the middle of the road with its hazard lights blinking. The vehicle was diagonally parked, its tracks indicating a sudden and uncontrollable stop. I activated my hazard lights, cautiously approached the scene, and noticed that the driver's side door was flung open, letting snow pile inside. What alarmed me most was the apparent bloodstains on the window and the steering wheel. My first instinct was to call 911 and get an ambulance here immediately. However, when I reached for my phone, I was met with a chilling realization. There was no cell service out here. Panic set in as I grumbled. Obviously, there's no cell service in the boonies. But my sense of duty compelled me to investigate further. Following a trail of blood in the snow, I believed the injured driver had gone in search of help. My initial intention was to be a hero, but after just 5 minutes of walking, a haunting thought consumed me. What if whatever the driver had collided with was still lurking nearby? Given the severity of the car's damage, I suspected a massive creature like a grizzly bear or something unknown. Dealing with a wounded animal in the dead of winter was beyond my expertise. My desire to be a hero waned, and I realized my priority was to return to my car, regain cell service, and call 911. As I retraced my steps, I heard an earth shattering noise, as if an entire tree had been uprooted. The deafening sound ignited sheer panic in me, and I sprinted toward my car. My legs felt uncoordinated, and I tripped face, first into a snowbank. Lying there trying to collect myself, a dreadful thought invaded my mind. What if whatever caused the accident was still out there? Moments later I heard it, heavy, labored breathing coming from just beyond my sight. The noise was overwhelming and triggered wild panic. I struggled to move from the snowbank, and the fear froze me in place. The breathing grew louder, and I saw something that defied explanation. It stood at least 8 feet tall, switching between running on 2 feet and 4. When it ran on 2 legs, it moved like a human. When on all 4s, it resembled a bear. Covered in thick white fur and splattered with blood, it was impossible to ignore. Terrified and paralyzed, I watched as it ran past me, still breathing heavily. For what felt like an eternity, I forced myself to my feet and bolted back to my car. But when I reached my vehicle, all 4 doors were wide open, and the pizza boxes were scattered on the road. Without thinking about the delivery, I raced to the police station to report what had occurred. The official police report stated that the driver had collided with a large bear, which then dragged him into the woods and devoured him. They never found his body, but did discover a portion of his spine nearly 80 kilometers from the accident site. The entire town was consumed by the mystery, and people searched for weeks. What haunted me most was that the police and conservation officers killed almost every bear within a 50-kilometer radius and examined their stomach contents. None of the bears had human flesh in their guts. The report concluded that only a massive bear could have caused such an accident. Whatever that thing was, it still lurks out there, and I pray I never encounter it again. Story number 2 title, Pizza Delivery. This is a night I can never forget. I worked at a local pizza joint called Dominic's. It was a Friday night, and we were on the brink of closing up shop. I was alone at the counter handling calls and cleaning, eager to head home. The phone rang. Dominic's Pizza. How can I help you? Silence. I was about to hang up, assuming it was a wrong number, but then the phone rang again. Dominic's Pizza. How can I help you? Again. Silence. My frustration grew as I was just minutes away from freedom when a feeble, elderly voice finally broke the silence. The man on the other end ordered 2 pepperoni pizzas for delivery. I maintained professionalism, though inside I was seething with anger. All I wanted was to wrap up my shift and join my girlfriend for the weekend. I informed my boss about the last-minute order, and he insisted I take it. Under my breath, I cursed him, but reminded myself that I needed the tip money. I noted the address and told the elderly caller the pizzas would arrive soon, but he had already hung up. Rude, I muttered, praying the tip would be worthwhile. After the cook prepared the pizzas, I loaded them into my car. My boss instructed me to head straight home after the delivery. It was late, and the shop would be closed by the time I returned. It was 11 p.m. when I hopped into my car, following the GPS to the destination, a house just 10 minutes away. The location was on the quiet side of town, surrounded by woods and forests. I pulled up to the house, a 3-story mansion on a silent, deserted street. I carried the pizzas to the door and rang the doorbell. The house stood in complete darkness, not a single light to be seen. I hoped it wasn't some kind of prank or a mix-up with the address. I rang the doorbell again, receiving no response. I considered leaving when I heard faint chanting, like a collective hum in unison. Then, I noticed silhouettes behind the windows. Panic set in. The people inside the house chanted louder. I couldn't see their faces, just dark, ominous figures within the dimly lit interior. I shouted, "I'm just here to deliver the pizzas." The chanting ceased, and even in the darkness I could discern sinister smiles on their faces. These were not welcoming smiles. They sent shivers down my spine. Those eerie smiles in the windows still haunt my nightmares. My minimum wage job wasn't worth finding out what these people were up to. I left the pizzas on the porch and sprinted to my car. I texted my boss about the situation and was ready to escape. As I glanced to my right, I saw 10 hooded figures outside my passenger window, clutching
Without a
bone
second
necklaces.
thought,
I floored the gas pedal, speeding down the street, never looking back. I quit my job the next day and swore off late-night deliveries forever. Story number 3 title, Creepy Pizza Delivery Guy. My boyfriend and I loved going out dancing on the weekends. And our tradition always included stumbling into our favorite pizza place before joining the taxi queue. Over the past year, we had become friendly with the guys who owned the pizzeria. They knew us by name, gave us discounts, and always made a fuss over us. But one Sunday night, the clock had barely struck 11 p.m., and we were already tucked in bed, ready for the work week ahead. That's when my phone rang from an unknown number, an unusual occurrence at this hour. I ignored it, hoping it was just a wrong number. But the night took a chilling turn when someone began knocking insistently on our front door. The house was cloaked in darkness, and it was clear that we were either in bed or out. I received another call from the same mysterious number, and the relentless knocking turned into frantic hammering, coupled with the eerie sound of our letterbox being flicked. Reluctantly, my boyfriend decided to investigate, though I warned him against it. If I'd been alone, I would have never opened that door. He descended the stairs to find out who it was, and to our shock, it was one of the guys from the pizzeria. He stood there with 2 piping hot pizzas in hand, pizzas we hadn't ordered. He leaned in and whispered not to mention this to the others at the shop. According to him, these were a gift, a special treat for his favorite customers. Us. My boyfriend accepted the pizzas and thanked him, but we couldn't shake off the uneasy feeling that settled upon us. We spent hours lying awake, wondering how this guy had gotten our address and phone number. It was indeed bizarre, and we couldn't shake the eerie sensation that had come over us. Story number 4, title: Pizza Delivery in Skinwalker. I'm a late-night pizza delivery driver, and this is why I need a dashcam. The pizza place where I work stays open until 3 a.m. and delivers right up until closing time. I have 2 closing shifts and work, well, very late. Shifts the other 3 nights. Last night was one of my closing shifts. I've encountered my fair share of eerie situations during my time as a driver, but most of them involve customers. There was that one guy who tried to drag me off an elevator while I held pizzas in hand. Another insisted I step into his home to set down a single small pizza, and when I refused, his friend blocked me from leaving. Just last night, a security guard leaned into my car and sniffed my hair. Men can be creeps, and I'm a small woman, but I always stay vigilant and carry protection, especially during those late-night deliveries. However, last night, on my second-to-last delivery, I witnessed something that went beyond anything I'd ever experienced. Some important information. Our store has a delivery map with specific zones. The farthest locations on our map are never more than 15 minutes away from the store. The map is divided into sectors, with letters on the I-axis, RR, and numbers on the AX, axis 118. When we get a delivery ticket, we can check the sector, e.g. J18, and locate the corresponding area on the map. Our store is in the middle of the top section of the map, with our delivery focus pointed south. I know this might sound like an unnecessary lesson, but it'll help you understand the rest of the story. Last night my shift was almost over, and I received an order. I picked up the ticket from the printer and glanced at the sector. It said none. Occasionally, this happens due to a glitch in the system. I sighed and loaded the pizza into my car, planning to use Apple Maps to find the location. When the address loaded, I understood why it was labeled as none. It was in the middle of nowhere, just 17 minutes away, sure, but farther than I was used to driving at 2:30 a.m. As I made the final turn onto a dark dirt road, a raccoon darted ahead of me along the side of the road. I chuckled at the sight. I'd seen raccoons all night, which was unusual. The first one had surprised me earlier in the evening, skittering around near my car during a previous delivery. I found it odd, but I brushed it off as a random encounter. But now I was driving down a dirt road with another raccoon leading the way. I tried to capture a video when it suddenly vanished into the trees. I reached the customer's house, handed over the pizza to a very grateful stoner, received a generous tip for my trouble, and headed back to work. I had just turned off the dirt road when I noticed a figure in the lane ahead of me. I slowed down and saw yellow eyes reflecting my high beams. I had my windows down and was smoking a cigarette. I know it's gross, but it was late, and I needed to freshen up the car. I leaned out and yelled, "Move it, Bambi," expecting to see a deer. But as I got closer, I realized it was a man. A rugged-looking man in tattered clothes stood in the middle of the road, his eyes glowing bright yellow in the light. I froze in place. My heart raced as he started walking toward me. I rolled up the windows, cigarette still in my mouth. He stopped about 5 feet in front of my car, turned his body sideways, but kept his face pointed at me, and then walked away from me, his eyes still shining. I was shaking as I reached for my phone to take a video. When he saw me move, he sprinted toward the tree line, and, I swear to God, I saw him drop to all fours right before disappearing into the darkness. I don't know what I saw. I posted a video about it on my social media stories. Just me talking, and I've received several messages from friends suggesting ghosts or demons. I shrugged those off, but my mom called me first thing this morning. I answered and waited in silence for a moment before I heard her firm voice come through. "What do you know about skinwalkers?" she asked, barely above a whisper. I felt a rush of true fear when she said that. My mom grew up on the Navajo reservation in Arizona. Her parents were Christian missionaries and raised my mom and her 2 brothers alongside the Navajo children. My mom is very familiar with the native faith, lore, and ritual. She's still a devout Christian and doesn't fear much when it comes to the paranormal, always attributing it to demonic activity. However, she has witnessed the terrors of the skinwalker firsthand. She was terrorized by one as a child, which eventually led to her family leaving the reservation. To make a long story short, the breaking point came when the skinwalker stopped running back and forth on the roof above her room and started trying to get into her room. My grandparents packed up their kids, the dog, and their most precious belongings into their camper and fled the reservation. My mom's last memory of that chapter of her life was looking out the camper window to see a man with shining yellow eyes running and keeping pace with their camper. He turned away as they exited the reservation. And it wasn't a problem again. If skinwalker lore is true, and I did see a skinwalker last night, posting this may be the dumbest thing I've ever done. Supposedly speaking of a skinwalker can draw them to you. Story number 5, title, Creepy Pizza Delivery. I'm now 30 years old, working in education for 8 years. Married and a father. Back when I was in college, I needed to save some money for my expenses. I'm from a tiny rural town in western New York, not far from my college campus, just about an hour's drive away. During my summer breaks, I worked at a local pizza place. My hometown was one of those super small places where everyone knows everyone else, and it feels like everyone's related somehow. Even if distantly, you could measure the size of our town by the number of traffic lights it had. We had just 2. Getting a job at the pizza place was easy because I knew the owners. One of them was the husband of my high school basketball coach, and the other was his mother who had owned the place for ages. She remembered me as a kid when I used to eat pizza there with my family. Looking back, I have to say it was one of the best jobs I've ever had. The work was fun, and the people were even more fun. I'd sometimes volunteer for double shifts, not just for the extra money, but also because it meant more opportunities to laugh at the silly jokes from my adolescent coworkers. Those hefty paychecks didn't hurt either. It's funny how back then, a few $100 in my paycheck made me feel like a millionaire. No taxes or debts to worry about, I guess. In our town, there were 2 small trailer parks where some residents lived. Many of them worked low-paying jobs or were on welfare. You could easily tell when payday came around because on those bi-weekly or monthly Friday nights, we were swamped with orders. Sheet pizzas, howajis, ice cream, sundaes, and soda. Orders kept piling up. All of these orders needed to be delivered. Imagine the challenge of delivering a piping hot pizza and an ice-cold sundae at the same time. During those days, I didn't even bother hoping for tips, especially from the trailer park folks. They usually wanted every cent of their change back. But honestly, I didn't mind the work. I enjoyed making deliveries. which allowed me some quiet time driving around and appreciating the natural beauty of my rural upbringing. Sometimes I'd blast the latest CD I had purchased with the car windows down. Of course, my greedy side loved the tips, as I got to keep them in cash at the end of the night, except when it came to trailer park residents. Working as a delivery guy could also be a bit unnerving. I made deliveries to houses where it was clear the residents were drunk or high. I'd been to houses where there was evidence of underage drinking, and delivering to local motels was often the worst. There I encountered truck drivers with obvious prostitutes, or lot lizards, as I heard them called, burly biker types with visible knife and gun handles, and plenty of other intoxicated or high individuals. But what fascinated me the most were the trailer park deliveries. As I mentioned, our town had 2 trailer parks, one on each side of town. When the owners of these trailers answered the door, I sometimes got a glimpse inside. It was surprising to see how well some of the residents lived, with multiple facial piercings and large flat-screen TVs hanging on their walls. I even spotted a massive saltwater tank with exotic fish swimming inside one trailer. However, there was one delivery to a trailer park that has haunted me for years. To put it bluntly, it gave me the creeps. It was a day like any other, having fun at work, cracking jokes with my co-workers and trying to keep a straight face while taking orders in person. I was doing delivery that night, looking forward to making some extra spending money. I had a bunch of order tickets and 2 insulated delivery bags filled with hot pizzas. The delightful scent of cheese and spicy pepperoni filled my Chevy Blazer as I set off on my route. The first 2 deliveries went smoothly, with nice tips to boot. The third was less fortunate, as I clumsily dropped their order of wings, though luckily they remained in the styrofoam container, still wrapped in a plastic bag, and none had fallen out. I blamed my clumsiness for the skimpy tip. By now, it was dark, and I had one more delivery to complete. But the 4th delivery is the one that still sends shivers down my spine. To protect the privacy of those involved, and because I honestly can't recall the exact details, I'll use a made-up address. 5 Trailer Park Lane, which was one of the trailer parks in my hometown. It took me a bit of time to find the place, but eventually the small reflective 5 sticker on the trailer caught my headlights. I parked in the lot, noticing that there were no other vehicles around, which was unusual. Furthermore, there were no lights on in this particular trailer, which struck me as odd, especially since customers who expected deliveries often left their porch lights on to make things easier for drivers like me. I knocked on the door 3 separate times, but it felt like an eternity before I got a response. Finally, the shadowy figure of an elderly woman emerged into view through the fox-etched glass window. The deadbolt slid open and the door creaked open, revealing an elderly woman dressed head to toe in a faded green sweatsuit. Her face displayed utter confusion. To protect the woman's privacy, and because I can't remember the exact conversation, here's a general idea of how it went. "Hello, here is your delivery," I said. "Delivery," the confused woman responded. "This is 5 Trailer Park Lane." "Yes, but I didn't order any pizza." At that moment, I thought it might be a prank, and I had fallen for it. Still, I decided to dig a bit deeper, looking at the order ticket. "Are you Marie?" I asked. At that point, the woman's expression shifted from confusion to sheer terror. "Who did you ask I was?" she questioned. "Marie." "Marie?" "Marie died 5 years ago." At that moment, I'm pretty sure my face mirrored her initial confusion. It was clear that something was very wrong, and I felt it was best to return to the restaurant and figure things out. "I'm sorry, ma'am. There must be some kind of mistake." "My apologies," I stammered. She responded with a weary nod and slowly closed the door, sliding the deadbolt back into place. As I descended the stairs, a sense of unease settled over me, and I drove back to the restaurant in complete silence. Once back at the restaurant, I shared the bizarre encounter with my bosses. Of course, they initially thought I was making it up and laughed it off. It wasn't until I convinced them of the truth that they started taking me seriously. They suggested that the woman might be suffering from dementia and had perhaps placed the pizza order and then forgotten about it. We decided to keep the pizza warm in case the woman called back. If she didn't, we could enjoy it ourselves while closing up. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened to me, so this explanation helped calm my nerves somewhat.